just as we were in a period of time where it was like a media-induced freakout over Megan Fox, there was also this takedown of, oh, this lady's successful. Can she keep it up? Can her next film top this, right? Like, oftentimes the way that the portrayal of women in media, in particular in filmmaking, it's everything has to be great or you're not asked back.
Welcome to Bible Boys, a podcast where two ex-evangelical siblings and an ex-Catholic non-sibling watch Christian media and either praise or condemn it. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Michael.
And this week, we cover the controversial 2009 horror comedy, Jennifer's Body. Before we seduce and eviscerate all the coolest boys at school, please be sure to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, like and comment on our video, and follow us on Twitter at TheBibleBoys. Loyal viewers will notice that Josh isn't here today because he's very busy with finals, and we are sad that he's not here, but we're gonna muddle on somehow.
We promised never to lie to our viewers. He's actually following Low Shoulder on tour.
Yeah, listen. Unfortunately, things broke bad, and Josh did have to murder one member of this podcast, and one of us is now a demon spawn. We'll let you, listener, figure out which one that is. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about Jennifer's Body. So, Michael, this was your pick. Do you want to talk about your introduction and what made you think about this?
So, I actually watched this movie when it came out.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, this is one of the films that I currently own a DVD of, even though I don't have a DVD player.
Wait, not only do you, I don't know what's wilder, that you own this on DVD or that you don't own a DVD player.
So my parents had one, so I would just end up buying my favorite movies to watch. And they came with me, even though a DVD player never did.
I guess that's fair. Nobody makes DVD players anymore. Oh, that's so wild.
No, and everything's streamable.
I'm going to get you a DVD player for your birthday. From 2009.
Just so I can watch Jennifer's Body.
Yes, your custom Jennifer's Body DVD player. Yeah, I mean, that's wild that you actually watched this when it came out, because I'm sure we'll talk about this after we do the summary, but I remember getting advertisements and seeing advertisements for this movie. I was like, oh yeah, I had just started high school when this movie came out. So I was a 14-year-old, almost 15. And I was like, man, Megan Fox is super attractive. I should watch this movie that's marketed about, how hot Megan Fox is. Yeah. So, we'll see. As it turns out, maybe not the best demographic to market towards. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, we will talk plenty about the marketing of this film, because I was instantly struck. So I'll give you the background of where I was in 2009. And this is kind of how the structure of the podcast is going to go. I'm going to talk a little bit about where I was personally when I watched it, introduce the plot, go through all of those points. I think that its reasoning for being inspired by Christianity media is pretty self-explanatory, given that it revolves around a demon.
Listen, is this Christian media per se? No. Will it fly for our podcast? Yeah.
It definitely isn't pro-Christian.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Are any of my picks?
No, but your picks do very well on YouTube, so here we are.
Well, and at the end, I do want to go over the reactions at the time and reactions contemporarily, because they're very different. So back in 2009, we were coming off of one of my other favorite movies, Juno.
I thought you were going to say Transformers for a second. I was like, no fucking way. But yes, Juno makes sense.
Yeah, Juno is one of my favorites. And I fell in love with this screenwriter, Diablo Cody. And to this day, I say, if anyone writes a screenplay about my life, I hope it's her. That's my dream. Because she just is... everything is so snippy and funny in these passing ways that you're like, oh my God, I'm laughing at a joke for 5 minutes that was a throwaway line. And I also came to this as a huge fan of Megan Fox, but a huge fan of Megan Fox for reasons that most people at the time were not fans of Megan Fox.
Let's talk about that, because Megan Fox had been in Transformers and apparently Bad Boys 2, because Michael Bay is a monster. Where did you hear about her besides that?
So Megan Fox was actually in a show that I used to watch. Let me pull up her Wikipedia because I want to make sure I get it correct. So yeah, so she was in a show that my parents loved and guest starred in a show that I loved. So the show that my parents loved was Hope and Faith, and she played the daughter and was just super funny. And she had this comedic timing that I thought was very memorable, and then would go on to guest star to a different sitcom from the era that I watched. And I thought she was just great. And then we got Transformers, and because I watched it like everyone else, I was like, okay, like, doesn't seem like top tier acting, but come to find out, it's just all the poor directing and everyone around her. And so I also would watch interviews and all sorts of celebrity news at the time. And so I was familiar with the concept of Megan Fox being the person that she is. And that's very witty, but also kind of protective of her own privacy. She was pretty open about being bisexual very early on and was talking about Michael Bay's horrific treatment about her. So that's where we are in 2009. Megan Fox has referred to Michael Bay as Hitler on the set and said that he's a total tyrant. And because of that, Michael Bay responded with a coordinated media effort in which he called Megan Fox an ungrateful bitch. He said that she was a bad actress. And I think this is all important context because this is going on. Juno's success is going on. And this film is coming out of the ether almost. Like, the studio had basically given the director and screenwriter complete control. They were like, do what you want. We don't want to be involved. And then this film gets marketed. And if you Google this movie, literally everything is Megan Fox looking sexy. And so I'd understand why, if you just knew that, you would think, oh, we're going to get this like gratuitous teen boy movie. Well, listeners, it's my pick, so that is not what we're getting.
No, I mean, even the YouTube, I watched it on YouTube yesterday, and like the captions on YouTube describe how hot Jennifer is, and like, oh, but her also kind of hot friend, there's gonna be a lot of like girl trouble, and that's gonna be a sexy time, and that's just not what this film is in any way.
No, it just really isn't. And I just find it so wild that that is how it's constantly framed. And we'll get into a little bit of that at the end. But let's talk about the plot a little. So we open with one of my favorite little opening lines, "Hell is a teenage girl." And that should really set the stage of what we're getting into here. I also have to note that the screenwriter Diablo Cody said that if she had seen a man write something similar, she would just not watch the movie. And I kind of agree with her.
Yeah, this is not a story that could be told from a man's perspective. Not at all.
No. So we open with this spooky scene of a house, and we see a girl watching TV. This girl's played by Megan Fox. We will come to know her as Jennifer. And Megan Fox is looking very sick for her. She's kind of pale. She's really thin. And this is where I'm going to interject my first of my fun facts in this episode. And that is, Megan Fox is just one of the best character actresses, and I will defend her forever because For this role, that was not prosthetics. That was not movie makeup. Megan Fox stayed inside and worked with a trainer and dietitian to lose like 25 pounds to shoot the scenes where Jennifer looks sick. That's all her.
Oh, I mean, like, I don't love that she, lost weight for a role. I feel like we shouldn't, normalize that. But, that is one example of like an actress being like an actual good character actor and not like fucking Jared Leto, like writing damaged on his forehead and giving his coworkers condoms. Like this, if you're going to do, in character acting, like, there's much better ways to do it.
Yeah, and look, I think that gaining and losing extreme weight for roles, while unfortunately not being new, it is so damaging and so difficult on the actors. But there's this weird combination with like the dedication it takes to also say, oh, I'm going to avoid the sun so I can look right for this role and for this point in the film where she's, supposed to look rough. And I think it's why it is so believable. It doesn't look like Megan Fox in ugly makeup. She looks like legitimately sick. And then we're introduced to Needy, played by Amanda Seyfried, and she describes herself as, I'm kind of the shit. And I just love that intro for her character. She's got a bunch of rabid fans, and a lot of them want her to convert to Christianity and accept Jesus Christ into her heart. And Needy says, yeah, I've tried that, and no one's come back from the dead, so what's the point? And the resurrection story is one that ends up getting used a lot in other media that is not Christian, but I feel like because of Christianity, all resurrection stories are kind of inspired by Christianity.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the side effect of having a Christian-dominated, country in America. Like, the most obvious parallel is Christianity.
Yeah. And so we get a scene where a doctor is telling Needy, you need to eat. And Needy proceeds to react in a very, very measured way and kicks her fucking teeth out.
She kicks her over 2 tables. It was very shocking.
And she's then put in solitary, and we get our frame narrative. Needy is like, all right, you gotta explain why I got here. We got a record scratch, let's go. And we're introduced to Devil's Kettle, which is a real place. It is on the border of Minnesota and Canada, and it is a waterfall where things just kind of go missing. There's actually a urban legend in reality, not in this film, that cars have gone missing in there. So they've legitimately like put shit in there and been like, let's try to find it, and cannot. And I just think that that's so cool that they took enough time to research Devil's Kettle and actually make something real. And we're introduced to Needy and Jennifer. They have a saying, sandbox love never dies, which is their cute little friendship moment. And they also give each other cute nicknames. Monistat and Vagisil.
Oh, I see. Their nicknames.
You mean you've never called your friend Vagisil before?
Believe it or not, no.
So Jennifer is telling Needy, let's go out, and saying you have to wear something cute. And that's a very specific thing. And we also meet Chip as Needy is getting changed and figuring out what she's going to wear that classifies as cute. And we get some introduction to the fact that Jennifer likes this new band, Low Shoulder, that's playing at the bar that will allow teenagers to go into. And Needy asks Chip when he makes a reference to Phil Collins, who's Phil Collins?
It's really,
I lost my shit.
Really funny. He's just like, you know what? Never mind. I have to go.
It was at this moment, too, that when Needy comes down from her bedroom when Jennifer calls her to go out, I instantly clocked the tension. Even the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, there's some sexual tension here. These two are way more than just close friends, or in the 80s, we would have called them gal pals.
I mean, they try to set that up at the beginning of the movie. They have, Needy like waving at Jennifer when Jennifer's in her like cheerleader uniform, and Jennifer like waving back. So like it is framed in a way that's like, okay, Needy is like, oh no, I'm not romantically interested in Jennifer, but like there is that tension throughout the whole film. And then this scene just continues to underline that.
Absolutely. And I mean, we get to the bar, and let's talk a little bit about the bar. So our eagle-eyed listeners who are trying to figure out who's the demon, we do already have a man in a band playing bars, so...
And I like the way that they go out of the way to frame it as like, like Needy is very concerned about why these people are here, because Devil's Kettle, they established population of like 7,000, like you said, on the border of Minnesota and Canada. Like not exactly a big touring spot. So she's immediately suspicious. She's like, why are these people playing this town that has like, there's going to be like maybe 20 people at this show.
Yeah, and I feel like Needy's kind of the audience insert because we're asking that too. And Jennifer is just like, whatever, who cares? And this band is asking, when they meet Jennifer, if she's a virgin. Mind you, she's supposed to be a high schooler.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty gross. Like the way that it's framed is like, Jennifer goes up and like is flirting with this band guy, and it was established previously that she thinks he's very attractive and she's into him. And I mean, he reciprocates that flirtation. And then like Needy is like listening to them talk, and she's like, hey, what the fuck? These are like adults talking about my high school age friend. And then like she goes and confronts them about it, and she's like, hey, my friend's definitely a virgin, so fuck off.
Yeah, and then when Needy tells Jennifer about this, Jennifer gives one of her iconic lines in this film, I'm not even a backdoor virgin.
It's pretty good.
I died laughing both times, both when I originally watched this and when I watched this the other day. And then we're introduced to the iconic song Through the Trees that will be stuck in your head for the rest of your days. And as they're performing our iconic track, a fire starts. And we now know that we are in a horror movie. I feel every horror movie has a moment where the tone shifts. And this one actually has several, but this is the first indication of this isn't going to be a full-on comedy. There are things exploding. We have people being trampled, people getting caught in the fire. And Jennifer and Needy escape through the disgusting bathroom in the back that we were introduced to earlier on. And as they're outside, Low Shoulders lead singer goes over and starts kind of hitting on them. It
is very, like, this is a interesting scene because of the way that tone shifts, right? Like they are continuing to play the music as the fire engulfs the whole bar. Like people are like flaming, running around, like shit is like the air is filled with smoke. Needy and Jennifer just barely get out alive. Jennifer seems to be in some sort of weird trance, like a vampiric thrall almost. She's just like so like focused on this singer. And, that's where we start getting like, okay, there's fire that came from nowhere. There seems to be some sort of spell. It seems like there's some sort of like supernatural shit going on here. And then he like comes over and acts totally normal. And he's like, oh, hey, yeah, that was terrible. Anyways, we should probably get to safety. And it's like, it's really, really skeeving me out.
Well, and he doesn't just say, let's get to safety. Want to head somewhere safe like my van?
It's so, like, patently awful.
And Jennifer goes with him to the van. And not to call out another podcast, but SSDGM, stay sexy, don't get murdered. You do not get into a stranger's van.
I mean, they even like make a point to be like, that's, that is a rape van. Like, it's, we're going to be talking probably about, metaphors for sexual assault here. So, I'll put a content warning in the description, but like, they make a point to point out that like, this is a bad situation and that is intentional.
Yeah. And so that actual line comes up just now. So Needy goes home. She calls her boyfriend Chip. We see all of his emo band posters, which I was just living for. It's so clear that this film was for teenagers in 2009. So if you were a teenager or even close to it around that time, you will find a band in the lineup
Fall
that you
Boy,
at least recognize.
MCR, Red Jumpsuit Apparatus, I think probably makes an appearance. Yep. Like, all of that shit.
So Needy talks to Chip, and Chip always seems kind of annoyed when they're talking about Jennifer. And he asks Needy, "Did you get the make and model?" And she responds with, "I don't know, Chip, an 89 rapist?" And that's the kind of van we're dealing with. I think that fully explains the overt, very clear messaging that this film gives, that it's not trying to pull punches and it's not trying to gloss over anything. It wants to be clear that we are to expect that Jennifer was sexually assaulted.
That's the metaphor here. And, that I had to watch a lot of YouTube videos, which I will also cite in the description, but like that, learning about that framing and understanding, viewing this movie through that narrative helped me understand the movie in a way like that I really appreciated. And, that's something you should keep in mind as we continue having this conversation.
Yeah, I think it's like a very important thing to introduce here. And with that, there's someone at Needy's house. It's Jennifer. She's soaked in blood. And she raids the kitchen for a full rotisserie chicken. Needy tries to stop her. She releases this like guttural scream that's like very demonic, and then throws up black bile.
It's not just bile, it's like spiky. Like in all the 2009 CGI glory, it like raises up like little spines on the floor. I was like, what is this?
I just love it because this film does not use very much CGI at all. A lot of the visual effects are truly visual effects. They are not computer generated. And that scene is a reminder of why that was such a good call. Because video editing and computer generated imagery has come such a long way in the 12 years since this came out. So again, Needy and Jennifer share a moment that's very charged, and it's violent, but also has this like intimate undertones where Jennifer she like attacks Needy, but stops and doesn't actually break any skin, doesn't actually harm her physically, but is kind of, physically aggressive. And we flash to the next day at school, and everyone is acting like teenagers, talking about all of the rumors going on with Needy and Jennifer in the bar. Apparently, 8 students had died, parents, a teacher, and we get a flashback again of Jennifer and Needy in the sandbox, which is where the "sandbox love never dies" saying comes from. And Jennifer walks in completely unbothered, just chipper and really witty and sarcastic and just very on-brand Jennifer. And Needy is like, "Dude, what the fuck?" In the way that you would also be like, "Dude, what the fuck?" if your friend showed up at your house bloody, threw up all over your floor, walked out, and just went missing, and then showed up next day to school like, "Hey, can I sit by you?"
The callousness with which Jennifer responds to this scene is important. And like, I didn't understand it at first, because it's like, why is she being so... I mean, obviously it's because, something weird has happened, and like, it's supposed to intentionally make you feel, that jarring, difference between the fact that everybody else is like really sad and she's just like flippant and, catty and making jokes. And like, there is another element of that, which is that like Megan Fox's acting in this whole movie, like the character of Jennifer is, a caricature of what she believed other people thought about her at the time, which is why we get, her, being this kind of like an airhead, who is just kind of like doesn't care about people because she's intentionally satirizing that.
Yeah, and really playing on the media's perception of her, because did you know that there were websites that banned her from their news because she was oversaturated?
Jesus.
Like the same thing that they've created. That's your choice. And by banning her, you are then using her to give yourself publicity. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to keep in mind with the character of Jennifer is she's supposed to be a satirical version of how the media and the public saw Megan Fox. And she is displaying, you literally read my mind here. She's displaying sociopathic tendencies, as I put down. And it's true. Like, she is just unbothered by any of this. She's making jokes. She doesn't care. And we have a football player in the middle of the field in this next scene. And screamo music cuts when Jennifer approaches him.
The soundtrack throughout this movie is both good and also so strange. Like, I thought the framing of this, like, very, 08 emo screamo music, like with this mourning kid, was just like, what is happening here?
I just love how the soundtrack is interwoven and used to create these moods that really are contradictory of one another. And that's this film, right? Like, this film is truly trying to walk this tightrope of both being a satire comedy and a supernatural horror. And Jennifer is hitting on this jock that she walked up to. She took him to the woods, makes out with him, and then a bunch of animals start gathering around.
This is a great scene because he's like, hey, like, let's stop making out. There's so many animals just here. And he's like, what are they doing?
And she really quickly just changes his mind by continuing to make out with him and asks him, do you miss Craig? Which feels like a mood killer.
Yeah, because, Jonas is the football player, and, it was established in the previous scene that, like, Craig was his best friend, and, he died in the fire.
And she says to him, after he says, yeah, of course I miss him, you'll see him soon. And he asks, you mean like heaven someday? She says no and then proceeds to eat him.
It is very disturbing.
She like unhinges her jaw like a snake and just eats him.
The way they describe it later on in the film is that he looks like lasagna with teeth.
Lasagna with teeth. It's so good. And so we are seeing the news say that Low Shoulder rescued people from the fire. And then our teacher, who is played by none other than J.K. Simmons, stumbles upon the corpse of this football player. And it's being eaten by a deer, which is just, I think, one of those heavy symbolism and imagery moments that they can really feel like you're getting beaten over with the head if they last longer than need be. And what I love about this scene is it's a quick flash, but you'll never forget that scene. And yeah, so he's obviously upset. We get to now meet Needy's mother, who is played by another great, because this film is just perfectly cast, Amy Sedaris.
Oh, is that who her mom was?
Mm-hmm. And so we learn a lot about Amy Sedaris' character here. She says that she was having a night terror about Needy being crucified, but it's 4 p.m. So we really get the idea that Amy Sedaris is a very distant mother. She sleeps all day. We don't really have an answer as to why. All we know is that she's really, truly just not involved in Needy's life whatsoever.
I think Amy Sedaris' character is very strange in this movie because, like, she says, like, first she says, like, they're having this conversation. Needy's kind of sniping at her because she's like, oh, I had this night terror. And she's like, well, it's 4 p.m., so it's more of a day terror, don't you think? And then she's like, one of these days, you're going to call for me. You're going to call for your mama, even though you're such a big kid. And I'm going to come running because I'm a hard-ass Ford tough mama bear. And I was like, all right, Sarah Palin, fucking slow your roll. But that does actually come up later. And I think it's interesting. And I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts as when that scene gets paid off later in the film. Because I really didn't understand the inclusion of her mom throughout the film.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I almost wonder if it's intentional that we have no mention of a father for either of our protagonist-antagonists, depending on how you view this film. They both can be both or neither. But I do think the mother-daughter relationships are interesting, if not, they don't get a ton of room to have moments other than this, and then of course it's callback later. But I find both parent-child relationships interesting. I think that it's not an accident that we meet both of their mothers. So our scene with Jennifer swimming in her lake, this scene was the cause of a lot of tabloid attention because they had stumbled upon filming, taken photos of Megan Fox swimming, and of course posted them everywhere. So there's some real irony here because I remember the framing of them being like, Megan Fox swims in nude bodysuit in like sexy new film. And the tabloid photos of her are more gratuitous and sexual than the scene. And it's just a reminder of you can really take photographs from a perspective and just kind of run with whatever you want, because this scene it's very clear that she is washing off the fact that she just murdered and mauled this guy. And the point of the scene is we see the steam coming off of her body. We're supposed to notice, okay, her skin must be really hot. She's changed. She's different. This is weird. And of course, the tabloid attention is, look at her. She's almost naked.
Yeah, it's definitely just such a strange contradiction because, like, it proves the whole, controversy around this movie, right? That Megan Fox is being unfairly criticized in the media when, like, this is what she was actually doing. She was doing kind of like a weird, moody scene to sort of, underline the terrible thing her character did. But when in reality, people are just like, oh, Megan Fox is naked again. Big shock. Like, and, this movie continues to justify itself in interesting ways.
Yeah, and in very... sometimes funny, sometimes, big media narrative ways like this one. And we get a quick little funny one, a one-off line that I had to jot down, which I did plenty in this film. Jesus didn't invent the calendar.
It's really good.
I just love that line so much. So the next scene that I really take notes with is when Jennifer and Needy are on the phone. And Jennifer is put on hold and she lights her tongue on fire. And it heals instantly. And when Needy switches back over from her call with Chip, Jennifer just says, I am a god.
That scene rules for so many reasons. Just like the fact that it's just like we just see her casually just like burning her whole tongue off. And then I am a god just fucking slaps. That's a great line. But what some of the YouTube videos that I watched pointed out, this is a Mean Girls callback. Because Amanda Seyfried was in Mean Girls, which I didn't remember until I watched that. I was like, oh shit, yeah. Because it's the Mean Girls, ambush call, which is very fun.
Yeah, and instead of Boo You Horror, we get Cross Out, whoever it is. And I fucking love that.
Slaps.
Cross out needy.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that we get a Mean Girls reference in this.
Had to.
We had to. And so we learned that Through the Trees has become this rallying call in this town. And the teacher announces, hey, they're doing a benefit song. And it's 3% of proceeds
3%.
are going. And Needy is like, what about the other 97%? And in this moment, I realized, I might be a bit of a needy. Because that's the sort of shit I would be like, wait, hold on. 3%, that's bullshit.
Some real Susan G. Komen energy coming from Low Shoulder.
For real. And, Needy is super annoyed. She's like, look, they didn't even help. They were acting super weird. And you guys are just all running with this rumor that they were helping. And one of the other students quips back, rumor, it's true. It's on the Wikipedia.
Again, Wikipedia was not that old when this movie came out. Less than 10 years old. So, God, people were like, yeah, Wikipedia. Anybody can edit that shit. God,
yeah.
Times have changed.
And so Jennifer is in class looking super sick. This is back to how we were first introduced to her in the opening scene. And Needy is saying, hey, you're looking kind of bad for you. And I do love that even everyone in this film, and it's very true, is all saying, hey, you look bad for you. No one is like, you just look bad. It's like, oh, are you tired? Did you not sleep well? And that's what you get when you cast Megan Fox. You get someone that can only look so bad.
Yeah.
And she asks her if she's PMSing. And another amazing line. I'm just going to quote this whole movie. PMS isn't real, Needy. It was invented by the boy media to make us seem crazy.
It's fucking rules.
And Jennifer then says that, quote, it's wearing off. And we don't know what, but we have to assume it has something to do with, I don't know, the boy she just ate. And that question lingering is cut off by an emo boy walking up, asking Jennifer out. He invites her to a screening of Rocky Horror.
Which is
to which she says, I don't like boxing movies.
That's the one where he's like, no, I have to go. I have to leave. And here's the thing. This emo kid is important. What is his name? Colin.
I think Colin, yeah.
Colin's important because, it was also set up that there is this tension between Needy and Chip about Colin because, Colin had previously talked to Needy about, their writing class and, they're kind of friends because they have this writing class together and they get along. And that's not a thing that most people do with this guy because he's a pretty stereotypical emo kid. And Needy goes and she's like, hey, Jennifer, I mean, that was kind of rude what you said to Colin. Why don't you be nice to him? And Jennifer's all like, oh, you think Colin's interesting and has value.
And she then says yes. She says, hey, come watch a movie with me.
It's specifically Aquamarine, and she's like, it's about a girl who's half sushi. She has sex with through her blowhole, I think. I was like, yeah. Which is so wild. I was just like, what is this movie trying to say to me right now?
I love it. I put in my notes at this point, straight couples can't be queer. Well, explain them. Because Colin and Jennifer as a couple are about the least heterosexual couple I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's very much two bisexual, people dating.
Absolutely. And, well, we also learned that Needy and Chip are gonna fuck. It's happening. And so we know that these two dates are happening on the same night. And so we cut to Colin in his car listening to a Screamo version of I Can See Clearly Now.
It's wild. He also has a phone cord in his car or something. I don't understand what's happening in that scene. It's wild.
This scene is so wild, and I think that this could have jumped the shark so easily here, and I feel like it just sticks the landing of being campy and over the top and aware of itself in such an effortless way that I'm shocked, because as I'm reading these things out, I'm like, no, they're good, they're good, they're good. So Colin pulls up to an abandoned house where Jennifer has told him to meet her. It's fully locked up and even boarded. He has to go through the window.
Like, bro, listen, no date is worth this, sir. If you can't enter the house through the door, you should leave.
Yeah, because I don't know, wouldn't you ask these questions of how did they get in?
Yeah.
And we get our safe sex propaganda here, where we learn that Needy and Chip are practicing safe sex because they're struggling with a condom. And, gotta give this movie props. I don't know how many times I've seen any movie dealing with teenagers having sex actually talk about any sort of safety, so...
Juno explicitly doesn't have them use a condom.
Yes. You can tell that Diablo Cody is very, very intentional with choices she makes in the film, and she's like, no, this one's not about pregnancy. No one's getting pregnant. We're making that clear. And Colin, as we're getting our two side-by-sides, Colin finds a bunch of candles set up on a tarp. It is literally a scene out of Dexter with how murder house this is. And I have so many notes on this next scene. So it's wild to me, the Needy Chip and Jennifer Collins scenes happening side by side, and we're getting flashes of both, and they're very different scenes. Jennifer pulls down Colin's pants and gives me one of her best lines. Nice hardware, Ace.
I was like, I think I groaned audibly. I was like, you can't do this to me.
And Jennifer's eyes flash this like reptilian looking situation. And Needy sees blood on her ceiling while she's having sex with Chip. And she starts crying and getting upset, and Chip is looking happy.
Well, because like it's sort of played as a joke, right? Because he's like, "Oh wow, she's really into it. She's making a lot of vocal noises, so I must be doing this good." His insecurity about his sexual prowess is also a part of his character. So like that's kind of the point. But it's like, yeah, like hey man, hey homie, maybe knock it off here.
Chip is a total himbo. An absolute himbo. There is not a thought going through that little head.
It's very stupid.
So Jennifer starts eating Colin in how we knew it would happen. And Needy knows that something is up. They have some sort of psychic connection. She starts crying. And then Chip says, "Am I too big?"
Yeah.
And it's like, dude.
Read the room, sir.
Dude.
Oh. But that scene in particular was very evocative to me because, like, specifically, it's in the lips where she can feel Jennifer. Mm-hmm. So she can feel Jennifer eating him, and she's like, ah, and like she sees, like, when they're having sex, she can see Jennifer like over Chip's shoulder, like just like watching them in like full on demon mode, and like that's when she's just like starts freaking out, and this whole scene is very creepy.
It's so creepy. And we cut to Colin with rosary in his hand, which I thought was a very important moment here. Because Colin asks Jennifer what she is. He knows that something is up before she, eats him. And so we actually have indication that Colin might be the first person to figure out exactly what Jennifer is, given that he had rosary ready. So Needy gets in her car to go get Jennifer. She's like, gotta save her. And of course, Through the Trees is playing.
She's like, God damn it! Like, smashes her radio.
And she almost runs into Jennifer, who then jumps on top of her car. And it is wild. This whole scene is creepy in a really cool way and a creative way, because it could have very easily been a cheap jump scare scene. And instead it's a dude, what the fuck scene, this whole build up here. And Needy turns around, goes home, and then Jennifer is in Needy's bed like nothing happened.
This scene, if you know anything about Jennifer's body, this is the scene that sets it up. And like, listen, I know about this scene because it involves a woman on woman kiss. So I saw this scene out of context several times before. But like, seeing it in context really, really changes the meaning, huh?
So Jennifer and Needy do have an entire makeout session. And I think something that's very important is the way this scene is framed is very different than any other sex or romantic scene in this entire film. It is a much closer shot. Usually it's only the two of them in the frame, like nothing, no negative space even. It's close-ups on their lips. It's close-up on hands. Like, we're super tight and close and intimate in a way that the other scenes are shot like your typical movie scenes. And I think that this really does show the difference in framing and how, like you said, this scene taken out of context is what a lot of people reviewed. I have this theory about the reviews that we'll get to, but it involves this scene. And it's frankly, I think people watched the trailer in this scene and thought they knew about the movie and didn't actually watch it. And that is the only thing that explains it, because this scene in context is like, holy shit, you've been building for this. And it's coming off of Jennifer being full on demon. And it is clearly this line of how much of this is something that Jennifer is just human id, right? And going after what she wants. And then also manipulating Needy.
Right. It's important to, we haven't really touched that much on it, but like Jennifer and Needy's relationship is very much like frenemies. Like it's like adversarial. Like there's definitely, Jennifer's nickname for Needy is literally Needy. That's not her actual name. Her real name is Anita. So it's like, you can see there's condescension there. And like the fact that Jennifer, makes Needy dress a certain way, which is like, not more, attractive than her. And like, they're always, she's always telling her what to do. I think they are trying to say something about, the ways in which teen girls have close, intimate, but also sometimes adversarial and toxic relationships. And like, this is an especially important scene because right after this is the one where she goes crying to her mom and her mom's not there. So she's just like, okay, I'm alone. And then she just goes to her bed and then Jennifer's there. And then she has this like weird compromised, kiss, which like, it's implied that it's going to lead into sex, but then Needy stops it because she's like, this is fucked up and I don't like what's happening here. And Jennifer just plays it off as a joke. But like the manipulation and the a lot of mindfuck stuff going on here, which is certainly interesting.
Yeah, I feel like the scene speaks volumes, and I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's the director. I have the quote, and I'm planning on coming back to it. But she describes how this scene in particular and the entire framing of their relationship is about how it's literally about how the patriarchy pits women against each other even when they're friends. Like, they exist to be in competition with each other for the attention of men. And I just think it's a very interesting observation about these very intimate friendships. And Diablo Cody was talking about how when she was writing this, a lot of what she was thinking is when she was young and she would talk on the phone with her friends for hours, and how as, we grow older, those sorts of friendships are not as necessary because we do fill that role with a romantic partner, or we spread that role across several friends, whatever it may be. You don't have one person who you're like, I'm going to talk on the phone with you for 7 hours with. But obviously, Needy and Jennifer are those friends. And so we get Jennifer explaining everything that happened. She calls Low Shoulder agents of Satan with awesome haircuts. And we flash back to the van. They ask Jennifer if she's a virgin. She insists that she is and that they should just let her go because she's not cool. And the band is doing some sort of ritual at Devil's Kettle. Evidently, they found it online, and I just fucking love that. If it were done today, they would have, like, just a screenshot of it on their phone.
Or, like, they'd watch it on TikTok or something.
Yeah. They'd be like, YouTube video, how to do satanic ritual.
Another really good line is that, like, there's one guy who's like, are you sure you want to go through with this? And then the other guy's like, come on, don't you want to be rich and awesome like that guy from Maroon 5? And then once he leaves, line. The other guy's like, Maroon 5? Really?
So they start deciding that they're going to kill Jennifer. And she is begging them not to, begging for help. And they start singing and kind of mocking her as they're stabbing her to death.
Specifically that 8675309 song, which is like, hey, Jenny, I've got your number.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's, you know, for me, like the most upsetting part of the movie, right? Because of the framing, because of like the, you know, clear fact that it's men exploiting a woman and like laughing at it. Like it's all very uncomfortable and upsetting.
Yeah, I have lots to say about that scene, but we're nearing the end of the plot summary, so we're just going to power through. I have so much to say about that. So Jennifer woke up and found her way back to Needy, and that's when that first scene with the rotisserie chicken happened. She says that she couldn't hurt Needy because she was such a good friend. And I love Jennifer, like, having to give herself a compliment there. There's something so human about her character, even when she is, you know, possessed by a demon. And Jennifer instead found the exchange student and ate him.
Yeah, I mean, one of my main quips with this movie is that the two Asian people in it are not treated particularly well. You know, white people directing Asians in 2009, not great.
No, and I think that that's an important thing to note is they're not handled well at all or with any sort of semblance of care. And I find myself thinking, I don't know that any particular character is. So I wonder if because the director is actually an Asian woman. So I'm wondering if some of this is intentional in a way. I'm very curious about that dynamic. And I feel like I would love to meet Karen Kusama and ask her questions about it, because I kind of feel some of it has to be a little intentional. But she says that she is unkillable when she eats boys. She then cuts her arm and instantly heals. And I loved this line. It's like some X-Men shit, right?
I was like, oh yeah, that's why Michael likes this movie.
If you can tell by now, this film is almost made for my interests. It feels custom made. And there are complaints I have, including its treatment of all of its non-white characters, that are very present and very there, and I wonder if they would be existent in the 2021 version of that film. That is a question I have and can answer about some films, and this one I can't. So Jennifer is then gaslighting Needy. She's saying that she needs help and that she is the one that is obviously having a breakdown. And she even says we can play boyfriend-girlfriend like we used to. It's another indication that Needy and Jennifer have something that's way beyond a friendship. And Needy tells Jennifer to leave, and Jennifer jumps out the window. And I think that's really just a funny way to leave, and she's just gone.
It is very funny because there's this very tense, you know, confrontation followed by like, okay, fine, I'll leave. And then she's like, wait, where are you? Oh, no, okay.
Needy goes to the library, and they have an occult section, and I was very upset when I watched this film that my high school didn't have an occult section.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, in her defense, she said it was a very small occult section.
But I'll take a very small one over none. We get like all the badass demonic imagery that you've ever seen in any painting ever. And I love that so much. And we find out that Jennifer is a succubus, a demon that preys on men. And Needy tells Chip, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I can't go with you to the dance. Jennifer is obviously experiencing demonic transference. And this is apparently what happens when you try to sacrifice someone to Satan, but they aren't a virgin. They become a vessel for a demon. And Chip is understandably like, Needy, I'm not so sure about that. And I think that, you know, that scene's tough because I don't know that there's anyone in my life, if they walked up to me and they were like, hey, your best friend is a succubus, I would be like, cool, I believe you.
Yeah, I'm very sympathetic to Chip in this instance because, like, I love the people who I'm close to in my life, but I would not, if they told me that they thought someone was a demon, I would say, okay, we need to go to a hospital.
Yeah. We cut to Chip getting ready, and his mom gives him pepper spray. And, you know, this is Chekhov's pepper spray. What can we say? We see Jennifer getting ready, and this scene is honestly one of my favorite scenes in this film because Jennifer has not fed in a while and is looking gaunt and pale, and she's just smearing makeup all over her face in these like slow but methodical ways. And there's something just deeply sad and biting commentary about it where she almost feels like she's covering herself up or putting on a mask. And we have that in direct opposition to Needy's getting ready, which is straight out of the 80s. And I just fucking love what they put Needy in for this.
Her dress is fucking wild.
Her dress, her hair, like everything is just wild. It is so clear that this is supposed to be her mom's prom dress that she's wearing. I think that was like the most evident thing, is it was her mom's prom dress. Because makes
a lot of sense.
So Needy is at the formal, and she's looking out for Jennifer, who has stumbled upon Chip.
Stumbled upon is generous.
Yeah. She says that she was calling out his name, and he was like, what? But I think this is important too. Jennifer is in a like pristine white dress, and I think that's very important imagery. Nothing in this film is on accident, so I really look at a lot of the costuming as very intentional choices. And Jennifer tells Chip that Needy and Colin were fucking.
They were porking on a semi-regular basis. She and Colin were doing things you've never even heard of.
It's just like that emotional manipulation. It's actually so interesting because I think it harkens back to The Exorcist in a lot of ways, where a demon knows things about you that you're most vulnerable and sensitive about and preys upon them. And we see that. And I just love the impact that that film has, that it kind of wrote the how to write a possession roadmap. We get a surprise performer at the formal. Low shoulder.
Yep.
Needy shares that exact emotion that you just expressed and is really annoyed. And they play Through the Trees. This will be stuck in my head for another 12 years.
It's such a good emo 2009 song. I don't know, maybe that's why it sticks so firmly in our minds, because that's the kind of music we listened to at the time.
Yeah. We get another really telling scene with Jennifer making out with Chip, and she says, "Say I'm better than Needy." And okay, so this is where I need to bring up this point. If there were an opposite to the Bechdel test, this film would fail it. And I love that.
Oh, like if two men are talking and it's not about a girl?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess the only real... There's Chris. There's like all the victims, and there's
Mm-hmm.
Chip. There is Chris Pratt, who made
Playing
it
himself.
playing himself. He's just Chris Pratt, like he normally
Yeah.
is.
He's like wearing a "Don't Tread on Me" shirt and a MAGA hat.
Yeah, it's really good. But yeah, there's really no significant male characters, and I don't think any of the men, except for the men in Low Shoulder, actually talk to each other, which is very
Yeah, and
interesting.
when Low Shoulder are talking to each other, they're talking about sacrificing Jennifer.
That's a good insight.
I love that, and I think more films should do that just because I think that's a good temperature check of, is that something you notice? Is that something that bothered you? Imagine every film being set up that way. So I love that all these relationships are framed this way and through Jennifer and Needy, and it is very clear that those two are the sun in the solar system. The entire film, the plot, even their relationships with men revolve around their relationship with each other. Because Jennifer is saying better than Needy. She is clearly going after Chip because of her feelings, whatever they may be. And they're complicated, right? Like there's some love there. There's some hate there. There's obviously this chemistry. And so Jennifer takes Chip to an abandoned pool. Needy instantly then, because she shares that psychic lip vibe, feels that Jennifer has got Chip and runs to save him. And we get this scene with Jennifer and Chip at the pool, and Jennifer saying that she feels empty. And this feels like a very pregnant moment too, where she's kind of confiding in Chip and being not quite vulnerable, but about as vulnerable as we see, especially Demon Jennifer be. And that's right before she pushes him into the water. And as Needy runs in, Jennifer has been feeding on Chip. And Needy breaks it up. And I put down like, wow, that's pretty ballsy given that she knows that this is a demon.
It's extremely brave. She like dives right into the pool and like drags Jennifer away. Like after Jennifer has like severed his neck with her teeth, she's like, "Get out of here!" Which is is swimming through this gross pool in her 80s prom dress. It's very, very impressive.
Yeah, this is a wild scene in some of the best ways. I also appreciate this scene because we get our pepper spray payoff because they're struggling and fighting, and Chip throws the pepper spray for Needy and she sprays Jennifer, who throws up on them and levitates. And this is another... I took several notes of some of the dialogue in this because the fight scene is just full of such good dialogue. Needy says, "You're a jerk." And Jennifer's response is, "Wow, nice insult, Hannah Montana."
That was a good one.
And then, of course, we get a controversial line in how it was used in marketing, but I think is actually an incredible line in the film, where Jennifer says that she's going to kill Needy, and Needy says, "I thought you only murdered boys." And Jennifer says, "I go both ways." And this film is a bisexual film. Like, I don't think straight people exist in this town, except maybe Chris Pratt. But this was used in marketing to, like, get people to, like, go in a, like, voyeuristic way. And that's not what this scene's about. That's not what this movie's about. That's literally none of it. But before I get too frustrated, Chip impales Jennifer with a pool net. And we, as the audience, know that she's probably going to heal because she just fed. Jennifer looks at Needy and goes, "You got a tampon?" Needy shakes her head, and then Jennifer responds, "This line fucking killed me. Thought I'd ask. You seem like you might be plugging."
It's pretty good.
I just love that dialogue exists right after this like intense dramatic fight scene. And it's a reminder, this film does not take itself too seriously. And a lot of that's because Diablo Cody does not take herself too seriously. And you have to realize in everything she does, there's this style of humor where it's reacting to the absurdity of life. And this is certainly absurd in a beautiful way. But Jennifer escapes and they just kind of let her go, which understandable. Chip is bleeding out, and what chance does Needy have against her? And Chip dies because the men in this film are to further the story, so Chip is fridged.
It is a little refreshing to see the deaths of men used to motivate the female characters.
It is a beautiful turn on its head. And so we flash back to the opening scene. Jennifer's in bed watching bad infomercials. Needy breaks into her window and attacks her. Notably, Jennifer bites her. They're struggling and levitating until Needy rips off Jennifer's BFF necklace from when they were kids. Jennifer stops levitating, falls to the bed, and Needy stabs her in the heart with the box cutter. The only way to kill a demon is apparently stabbing it in its heart.
And her like last words are my tit, which is pretty good.
I'm glad that you had that too, because I had that listed as it's so perfect that Jennifer's last words are my tit. And Jennifer's mom walks into the murder scene. And that is how Needy was sent to the asylum we saw her in. And the scene with Jennifer's mom is pretty intense because it's clear she had no idea about anything that Jennifer had been doing. But she's like cradling her and holding her and sobbing and wailing. And Needy's just kind of sitting there and kind of in shock.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the first scene we see Jennifer's mom at all? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was very jarring to me because I was like, wait, I guess, yeah, I guess this would be the reaction. Of a parent to, walk in upon their daughter's murder. Like, it is very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And, well, we learn that Needy, back in the asylum, has actually absorbed some of Jennifer's demonic powers because of the bite. She can now levitate, and some of that super strength that we've been seeing about her being, described as a kicker early in the film, that is some of the demonic power. And it also, I think, explains some of the change in Needy's personality. And it's a combo of the trauma that she experienced and this actual, demonic powers. I don't know about you. If I could levitate, I too would open an introduction of me with, I'm kind of the shit.
Yeah, that's the point of playing Dungeons & Dragons, right?
Yes. So Needy escapes from the asylum and walks by where all the things thrown in Devil's Kettle go. We see the little orange balls from the beginning. We see all of the little things that we've seen. And she actually picks up the knife that was used to sacrifice Jennifer. She hitchhikes her way to a Low Shoulder concert. And, of course, we get a Low Shoulder sign on the side of the highway. I like that the person she's hitchhiking from is like, where are you going? And she's like, oh, I'm following this band. And she says, yeah, it's their last show.
And he's like, yeah, okay. Sounds good to me. I don't give a shit.
I just love it too, because this is such a stranger danger moment for him. Like, he does not know what he would have gotten himself into if he tried anything.
Well, I was a little worried they were going to do the thing where it's like, oh, it's going to be a creepy guy who tries to, prey on her, and then she'll, reverse it and kill him. But I thought it was just kind of nice to be like, it's just an old dude.
It's just a dude. Because here's the thing. The truth about hitchhiking is the average person who does it is probably this guy. They're just like a nice, well-meaning, kind of quirky older person. So Our end scenes are the band interacting with fans, being general assholes, doing a bunch of drugs, and Needy brutally murders the entire band in the end, and we see crime scene photos as the credits scene. So that is Jennifer's Body. So let's talk a little bit about the instant reaction. So at the time, this film was not well received at all.
Yeah.
It panned. And so I had watched this and, you know, I was in the process of coming out. Like I had this very queer piece of work that I thought was so well executed. And also being a fan of horror and the genre, it felt like a film that was custom made for me. And so I was always kind of shocked that people didn't get it. But maybe by nature of not being the target demographic for this film, in spite of being a teenage boy at the time it came out, I really didn't see much of the marketing strategy towards it. I was familiar about this film from Diablo Cody and had seen her talk about it in interviews, so I kind of knew what I was getting into. Let's take you through some reviewers who didn't. Because we have some reviews that just don't get it. So the positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes were only 45% positive. The average rating was 5.3. And the critical consensus states, Jennifer's Body features occasionally clever dialogue, but the horror comic presence fails to be either funny or scary enough to satisfy. CinemaScore gave it a C-. And we see a lot of really negative comparisons to Twilight. A ton.
Roger Ebert even called it Twilight for boys, which was misguided, I think.
Yeah. So a review in Time Out New York said, the movie has a centerfold sheen to it and some lesbianic softcore flirtation to match, as its plot deeply dives into a Twilight-esque heavy mellow meltdown in the last act. And none of that is true. No. None of that is true at all.
Not really.
And the Baltimore Sun said the only perfect aspect of the film is its title, and said, no one is going to like this movie for its brain. And here's the review that I mostly wanted to get to. From USA Today, Jennifer's Body is not as hot as you would hope it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get really annoyed with this because the reviews go in two directions, and it's too hot and it uses a lesbian scene to sell itself, and it's not as hot as you would think it would be. And it's like, okay, what would you like? Especially given this film is not supposed to be hot.
Right, like, that's where we can get into, like, the marketing fiasco that happened, which is, like, even when I was watching it yesterday, I really struggled to, like, have thoughts about it because, like, I was like, this movie didn't really work for me until I went back and watched some YouTube videos. I was like, okay, now I get it. But those videos pointed out, it's not aimed at me. It's not aimed at, a cishet, person who's grown up in the general standard culture of America. It's not for men, really. And, like, that's why a lot of the stuff did not work for me. And that's why it shouldn't have been marketed towards men, which is like, this is a movie for, women that are probably, young women specifically. And the fact that the marketing just completely just went with the Jennifer or the Megan Fox aspect really shows how poorly handled the whole concept was.
Yeah, and I actually have a couple of quotes about that. So this is taken from an interview done with BuzzFeed between the screenwriter Diablo Cody and the director Karen Kusama, and it's titled, "You Probably Owe Jennifer's Body an Apology." And they sat these two down back in 2018 to talk to them about this film, because starting in about 2018, it started to have this online renaissance where basically every queer person was like, hey, I actually loved this movie. And it ended up being this chorus of people who were not at all featured in any of the critical reviews at the time saying, oh no, I get this film. And Karen Kasama said something really incredible about it. They had a marketing plan in place before seeing the movie and then just stuck with that. She said, guys, we can't market this movie to boys and then have them go into the theater expecting one thing and then seeing Megan Fox not really take off her clothes, but rip a guy's intestines out and eat them. And that's literally what happened. Literally what happened. And I also think it's important to note that, like we said in the beginning, people were looking for a reason to take down Megan Fox because she was seen as being ungrateful for Michael Bay. And the reason she was being seen as ungrateful is the quote I mentioned in the beginning about her comparing him to Hitler, but more importantly, her going on Jimmy Kimmel saying that she thought he was kind of creepy, kind of weird for putting her under a waterfall at 15 years old as an extra.
In Bad Boys 2, yes, in a bikini. And, like, the whole thing was like, okay, well, we can't have her at the bar because she is a child. Michael Bay's way to solve that was to put her under a waterfall as a child with a drink. Like, it's so fucking gross. And, like, the whole backlash, apparently there was this big letter that was allegedly, you know, the crew of Transformers, and, like, apparently 1,000 people signed it. But, like, in reality, it was probably just, like, you know, 3 people, including Michael Bay. It's so fucking gross. And, like, the fact that the marketing was just like, yeah, I mean, we just have to play on the fact that it's a Megan Fox controversy just goes to show that, like, yeah, Megan Fox was 100% right in being critical of Bay and of the Hollywood, you know, the way that Hollywood treats young women. And, like, some of the ways that she would talk about the way that she was directed when she was asking for acting advice, like, in how her character is supposed to respond in a scene, is just like, oh, be sexy, be hot. And, like, as someone who is a, you know, a legitimately talented actress, that sucks.
Yeah. And I think, too, it's like, okay, so we were trying to take down Megan Fox for some really problematic reasons. And in direct opposition to that was the fact that Diablo Cody was arguably one of the hottest screenwriters at the time. Juno was an explosive success on this paper-thin budget, and no one really expected it to be, and it just really was everything. And the studio then gave full carte blanche for this film, and I think that's so interesting because Diablo Cody literally said, yeah, I've been honest about wanting to make a feminist horror movie, and that's something I wanted. And it's just so interesting to me because just as we were in a period of time where it was like a media-induced freakout over Megan Fox, there was also this takedown of, oh, this lady's successful, can she keep it up? Can her next film top this, right? Like, oftentimes the way that the portrayal of women in media, in particular in filmmaking, it's everything has to be great or you're not asked back. And that's so wild to me because so many directors have flops and are asked to come back.
I mean, Michael Bay himself, right? Nobody likes... Listen, that's not true. People watch Transformers, but nobody thinks Transformers is high art, right? But, you know, he is still, you know, cranking out Ninja Turtles movies and whatever the fuck he's doing lately. So, like, that's, you know, this is not probably new to listeners in our podcast, but, you know, people of color and women in the United States do not get the same chances that white men do, unfortunately, or, you know, cishet white men specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's really a symptom of a lot of problems here. And, you know, that needs to be part of what we view the marketing with. And, you know, Diablo Cody also said that people ask her all the time, why don't you make more films, more movies like Jennifer's Body? And she said, I could have made more movies like Jennifer's Body if people had actually fucking gone. And so the Me Too era actually is what largely sparked this film coming back as a revenge fantasy. So we're also going to borrow from an amazing, amazing article from 2018 by Constance Grady for Vox, how Jennifer's Body went from a flop in 2009 to a feminist cult classic today. And, you know, in that article, she mentions that a lot of contemporary reviews say, oh, this film, if it came out in 2018, would have been the biggest hit. And it would have really just exploded. And she makes some really, really interesting comparisons. So she says, one of the movie's most disturbing moments comes when the band has Jennifer tied up, begging for mercy. They start to laugh. They launch into a group chorus of 876-5309, Jenny, with the lead singer singing into a sacrificial knife like a microphone. Then they start stabbing her to death. Watching that moment in 2018 brings up unavoidable echoes of Christine Blasey Ford's testimony about Brett Kavanaugh's alleged sexual assault on her when she was a teenager. Of the phrase, indelible in the hippocampus is the laughter. Jennifer's pain is funny to these men. For them, it's a lark. For her, it's a moment of trauma that's going to change her forever. And interestingly enough, Constance Grady is not the only person who sees that comparison. The director, Karen Kusama, in that BuzzFeed interview said, maybe you just watch Susan Collins vote yes on Kavanaugh and you say, wait a second, what about that movie was sort of about girls becoming monstrous in the face of the patriarchy? And it really is a film where the patriarchy is the big bad. And Grady actually goes on to really sum up my own feelings about this. What Jennifer's Body offers up in response to the trauma and tragedy of what happened to Jennifer in the van is a cathartic fantasy of what happens next, of Jennifer turning her trauma against her attackers, of her using her victimized, violated body to wreak bloody vengeance on the patriarchy. And lo, suddenly, Jennifer's Body is not a sex fantasy, it's a revenge fantasy. And that is the film we watched. We watched a revenge fantasy.
I kind of want to push back on that because, like, this YouTuber I was watching, Rowan Ellis, it's not a traditional revenge fantasy, right? Because the person who is victimized, Jennifer, she doesn't get the revenge, right? She takes her anger out on other men who are not necessarily innocent, but weren't the perpetrators of violence, right? The actual revenge, justice is delivered by Needy, who is, affected by Jennifer's trauma. But one way in which this movie is very interesting is that it does not cast Jennifer as a, good victim, quote unquote, right? She is somebody who has been traumatized and has to act out her trauma in, ways that we don't necessarily want to root for, right? In traditional revenge fantasies, I'm thinking like, Kill Bill or Promising Young Woman, right? We're like, okay, yeah, we're going to watch this woman who is wronged, torture and murder and destroy, all these terrible men. And that doesn't really happen, really. We don't even glorify in the violence that happens to Low Shoulder, right? It's literally in the credits. And like, that's, I would argue it's not really the point of the movie. The point of the movie is, the ways in which women are pitted against each other and have close, intimate relationships and have to deal with each other's trauma. And I think that makes it a very interesting movie.
Yeah, I think there's so many layers and bent genres and many a motif in this film. There are so many. I think there's almost nothing you can say it definitively isn't, except for a sex fantasy. This film is not that.
No, in no way.
So, Aaron, what did you think about this film?
So, I mean, like I was saying, like, I didn't really like it. But that's the point. It's not for me. I'm a straight dude. Like, the emotional, resonance is for young women who have, manipulative relationships and who are struggling against a patriarchal society that pits them against each other. These beats aren't going to resonate with me, and that's fine. I'm glad it exists, though, right? When I watched people talking about it, I found that the beats that it does hit are intentional, and I like that intentionality. I like the fact that it is trying to say something. So, even if it wasn't for me, I'm glad that it's there.
In direct opposition, this film was entirely for me. I finished this film and went, is this my favorite movie? It's a strong contender. I don't know that it's my favorite, but I would say it's definitely in my top 10. Easily.
Yeah, that shouldn't surprise anybody listening.
Nope. Everyone listening is like, okay, obviously.
Extremely on brand.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest question is, where's the sequel? I would love to see a follow-up of some sort. Diablo Cody has said that she's just really not in a movie-making place now, and to be fair, she really shone on United States of Terra, so I understand that she likes that like long drawn out storytelling. But anyone out there wanting to pick up a new series and get a bunch of queer viewership, I certainly will tune in to a Jennifer's Body TV series.
Well, listeners, if you support the Bible Boys Ko-fi, if you buy us 400,000 Ko-fis, we are going to crowdfund Jennifer's Body sequel. So hit us up. Links in the description. It's not, but I wish.
But if you all really just demand it, then we can make this happen.
We'll make it work. Tell your friends about Michael's great and thoughtful analysis of this movie, and we'll start the social media campaign soon.
So I think what's left is let's go ahead and give our reviews for this.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would give this a 12th station. Jesus dies on the cross. I didn't enjoy watching it, but I am glad it happened.
I feel like I've gotten multiples of that in reviews from you.
Yeah, it's a pretty good go-to whenever I have to sit through one of your horror movies.
Cut to Ted Cruz audio. Why am I being persecuted? So I am unsurprisingly going to give this film 5 out of 5 disemboweled band members because I was here for everything in this.
Oh, perfect. So to make a sharp left turn out of that, Josh isn't here right now, so we'll have to confer this with him. But so the next week, I believe it is my pick, and the week after that, we have a special book club, which I'm excited for. But I have, normally Josh does the experimental ones, but I have a fucking wild one. Michael, watching Jennifer's Body, I was like, man, 2009, great year. I had a lot of nostalgia. That's when, around the same time I was getting into some really good PS3 games. And one PS3 game that came out in 2009, maybe 2010, it's called Dante's Inferno. And I am proposing to you that we watch the 90-minute cutscene movie of the Dante's Inferno video game, and we talk about that video game for our podcast.
I am so fucking here for this.
Yeah, I figure that this would be an interesting one. We had a very erudite conversation about Jennifer's Body, so I'm excited to have a very stupid conversation about a stupid video game.
Oh, I'm so excited to show off my range, much like Megan Fox.
Yes. Well, listeners, as we cry into our glasses and pour out for Megan Fox, just remember that it is okay to cry, because even Jesus wept. We'll see you all next time.